Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And my name is Aina Sofia Adila binti Muhammad Anwar, and I will be doing an elaboration on a case study on multilingualism in children. So before I begin with my presentation, I would like to open a question, which is, if a child can speak many languages, meaning he or she is a multilingual speaker or a bilingual speaker, do you think that would guarantee the success of their lives? So, at first glance, we might think, yes, of course. After all, multilingualism is associated with intelligence, cognitive flexibility, and also better opportunities. However, the reality is much more complex. So, this is because multilingualism is defined as the dynamic and integrated use of more than one language, not just the ability to speak them separately. This means language is not stored in isolated compartments but rather interacts continuously within a child's cognitive and social system. So, in early childhood, especially between the ages of 5 to 12, language acquisition is particularly important because this is considered part of the critical developmental period where children are highly sensitive to linguistic inputs. Because of this, studying children allows us to understand not just language learning but also his or her cognitive development, identity formation, and also social integration. So, in this presentation, I will be analyzing two contrasting case studies of multilingual children to explore how different environments can lead to very different outcomes despite both children being multilingual speakers. Now, let's take a look at the two case studies. Oh, before that, let's take a look at the meaning of multilingualism once again. Like I said before, multilingualism is the dynamic and integrated knowledge and or use of more than one language or language variety. So, while there are a lot of there are many types of multilingualism out there, but in this presentation, I will only be focusing on two types of multilingualism, which are additive and also subtractive. So, additive multilingualism is when a person learns a language and this new acquired language does not interfere with his or her mother tongue. It means the language will only act as an adds-on. Meanwhile, how it differs from subtractive multilingualism is that when a person learns new language, this new language will be replacing his or her mother tongue, which means that instead of adding on, like the additive multilingualism, it will replace the language, the mother tongue or the language this person already knew before. Okay, so in this case studies, the first child in case study one is known as A. So he is a 5-year-old multilingual preschooler living in Santorini, Greece. Meanwhile, the second child is Jane, not actual name. So she is a 6-year-old Indonesian Russian girl living in Indonesia. Okay, so in the first case study, A, the boy, he can speak four languages at 5 years old, which are he could speak Albanian and Flemish. He could speak Greek and also English. The core research in this study, in the original case study, was that the case study wanted to explore how the boy the boy could have this hybrid identity amid the clash between his minority home language and the dominant school language system, in which the school was focusing more onto the Greek language instead of their mother tongue or L1 of the children in that school. Meanwhile, as for Jane, um, Jane is she cannot sorry she cannot speak in Indonesian or she cannot speak in Russian, but she can only speak in English, which in this case study, it observes how she faces significant barriers in the Indonesian school system, where the medium of instruction is in Indonesian, causing her to experience linguicism, which means that in her case, she was facing um, she was facing discrimination in her school because she could not speak in Indonesian, and because she could only speak in English. So right here we can see that for A, he likes English as preference. As for Jane, she prefers English as her mother tongue, which means as for their proficiency, it's different. A is not very proficient in English, but he still can speak in English and other languages. But Jane proficiency in English is very excellent, but she could not speak in other languages. So before we delve further into the presentation, I would like to state the objectives and research, in which I would like to explain the methodology and the ethical consideration in this case study. First is that I've used secondary data, which means that I've taken case studies that have already been conducted on the internet, and then I reanalyzed it. This is because um, I would like to prioritize the safety efficiency, which this method it avoids the need for direct intervention with minors, with children, and the requirement for parental consent, which will take a longer way and a more complicated method. And this is also so that I can have a more expert because it provides access to valuable observation conducted by language experts. And then, because of the scope, and because this approach enables a high level analysis of linguistic patterns across diverse cultural and educational contexts. Next, as for the ethical consideration, not that different. First is anonymity, which is pseudonyms are used for the children involved in order to maintain their anonymity. We don't want to expose any information about the children. Um, and next, we have academic integrity, because this study adheres to the APA 7th edition referencing in order so that we can ensure a proper credit and academic honesty. Last but not least is the accuracy. The data presented in this case study is presented accurately to avoid misinterpretations, such as like what we call as cherry picking, in order to respect the intellectual property of the linguistic community. So now, uh, the objective, the objective of this case study is that to answers is that to answer these three essential questions, which is first, what factors contribute to bilingualism and multilingualism in children? Second, how do language, learner, and learning contact influence successful acquisition? And last but not least is how do these experiences shape identity, communication, and also learning? So these three essential questions will be discussed in the finding and also discussion. Okay, so let us take a look at the first finding and discussion. Is that the factors contributing to bilingualism and multilingualism in children. So, as you can see in the slides in the presentation, I have already combined the said factors that I have found in both cases, which are mainly about family dynamics, social ecology, and also incidental learning. Okay, so we'll be take a look at the family dynamic first. So in case one, A's parents actively maintain multiple languages at home. This is known as simultaneous multilingualism, where a child is exposed to multiple languages from birth. As you can see I've already included the excerpt from the original case study, in which the mother from an interview, the mother said that at their home there's a cable TV with Albanian channels, and the mother will read them bedtime stories in Flemish, which means that the boy from Greek, he was already he had been exposed to several languages since he was a child. And then when he goes to school, he learns Greek. He had to learn Greek, and then at home, they also have other channels that shows English cartoons such as Disney and etc. Meanwhile, Jane Jane's family, they initially practiced multilingualism, but over time, English became more dominant for Jane because in Jane's case study, the father agreed to talk in the father and the mother had made an agreement that the former would use English and the latter would use Russian, which means her father should be speaking in English and her mother should be speaking in Russian, and then her grandmother should be speaking in Indonesian. But then over time, they started to abandon this language policy in their family, and they just started to resort to talking in English at their home, in their household. Next is the next is the incidental learning. Incidental learning is a major factor of English language. Excuse me. Okay. So as for the incidental learning, in both cases, uh, both of the children acquire English through incidental learning, which means they never receive a proper or formal teaching about English, but rather they acquire the language through watching cartoons. As you can see, according to the mother of the boy, in his spare time, he likes to access material that is English, for example, like cartoons. This is the same with Jane, which Jane was exposed to English for around 4 hours a day. Given the high exposure to Disney Channel films, Jane was the only one who was fluent in English in their family, which means that both of them um, acquires English um, through incidental learning. Okay. Next is the socio-ecology. The child's environment, such as living in a host country. I forgot to mention that A is from an immigrant family, and he needs to speak in Greek at school, which means that he is actually being forced to learn Greek in order to fit in and also communicate at school. That's why he can effectively acquire Greek at such a young age. Meanwhile, uh, as for Jane, she is a Russian Indonesian mixed girl living in Indonesia, but she still couldn't talk in Indonesia because of the pressure in Indonesia was too overwhelming for her. So this can be seen through the excerpt. Although the majority of teachers expressed their support for bilingualism and preservation of immigrant students' heritage languages, which for A's case were Flemish and also Albanian, they see these issues as exclusively belonging to immigrant populations and unrelated to language acquisition in schools, which means although the teacher do acknowledge that students should be preserving their mother tongue, such as Albanian and Flemish, they still think that those problems only belong to immigrant families, such as families. So in school, they will think that you still have to speak in Greek because you're living in Greece. So for this reason, the boy in the case study has to learn Greek from school. Meanwhile, as for Jane, who failed to adapt to such situation, she was viewed as having inadequate ability because of the language she did not speak. She was also stigmatized as a weak student. In this case study, she was described as a hardworking student, but she could not satisfy the school's expectation of her because she just because of the fact that she couldn't speak in Indonesian. So, there's actually theories related to related to the factors, which is the first theory will be the social cultural theory by Lev Vygotsky, which um, Lev Vygotsky believed that children acquires languages through support system or their surrounding, like their environment, the community around them. So in A situation, A has a very strong support system in which the teachers still acknowledge that it is important for him to preserve his mother tongue and also support him in learning in Greek, which causes him to have successful multilingualism. And next, however, in Jane's case, there's a lack of support and also linguicism from the school, which equals to poor acquisition. This is one of the reasons why she could not acquire Indonesian no matter how long she has been staying in Indonesia because of the lack of support. Next is the incidental learning. So the incidental learning relates to questions input hypothesis by Stephen Question, because Stephen Questions he believes that language can be acquired through comprehensible input, which is in this case is through cartoons, because cartoon explain or uses English in such in ways that students or children can understand. So, therefore, this is why the both of them can attain English so easily. For instance, Jane learned English through Disney Channel and also cartoons, and also A also accessed English media. The next finding and discussion. The first is how do language learning and learning contact influence successful acquisition. So as for the learning contact, I have found that um, the state of whether the language is facilitative towards the children or not. So um, so, in the first case, for language contact, Greek acts as a facilitative language and it helps A to integrate into society because although he is an immigrant living in living in Greek society, he still can fit in because he the Greek language is facilitative. He can facilitate he can use the language in order to fit into the community. Meanwhile, in case two, in the Indonesian language became a barrier for Jane instead of being facilitative because she practically could not speak the language. So, because the fact that she could not speak and understand the language, she cannot access the curriculum. She cannot make friends. She cannot talk to anyone because everybody around her speaks in Indonesian. Meanwhile, she can only speak in English. Therefore, you can say that a language can either support or block learning depending on their proficiency. Next is let's take a look at the learner's contact, which will be looking at the motivation. So, um, this is explained by Robert Gardner, where he identifies two types of motivation: integrative motivation, which is the desire to connect with people, and also instrumental motivation, which is the practical need. You can say that integrative motivation is more apparent in A's case study, which is the first case study, where the boy, he wanted to learn more languages. He wanted to master all the four languages because he wanted to fit in. He wanted to integrate. That's why it is called integrative motivation. He wanted to integrate into the community. He wanted to be um, He wants to fit in with other children his age, despite being in a host country. So, because of this desire to connect with people, it becomes rather an internal motivation rather than external. Meanwhile, for Jane, it is what we call as instrumental motivation, which is the practical need. Um, Jane's motivation, uh, Jane's motivation in learning Indonesian is more pressure. She is more pressured because she needs the language for her practical, for her daily life. But then she could not access the language because she couldn't speak the language. Therefore, this is why Jane lacks motivation, and this is why she prefers English as her media. Therefore, motivation determines whether a child engages with a language or he or she wants to avoid it. Next is the learning context. Ace teachers support Ace teachers support his multilingual abilities. Meanwhile, Jane's teachers views her as weak. This leads to linguicism, where a student is judged negatively based on his or her language ability, in this case, Jane was being discriminated against due to her inability to speak in Indonesian. So, when schools fail to support multilingual learners, they are not just affecting language, but they are affecting the student's identity and also confidence. Now that we have taken a look at the factors, let us take a look at what uh, at the impact of the multilingualism and also bilingualism in children. So the final finding examines how these experiences shape first identity, communication, and also learning. First, let's take a look at identity. So identity for multilingualism, for A, he develops confidence and also a hybrid identity in which he can fit in many, he can forge his identity according to the person he speaks. If he wanted to integrate himself into the Flemish people who speak in Flemish group, he will speak in Flemish. If he wanted to speak with his Albanian friend, he will talk in Albanian. If he wanted to speak, if he wanted to um, be in school, he will speak in Greek in school. So this is why he has so much confidence. Like in my essay, I've stated that um, A is a successful multilingual child in which he had demonstrated greater self-confidence and self-esteem than his older brother, who lacked the same multilingual exposure at that age and felt insecure speaking Greek. So during at the same age, his brother used to feel very insecure because his brother was not multilingual back then. But A demonstrated a better self confidence because he could speak in many languages, including Greek. Meanwhile, in case two, um, the anecdotes reveal a language mismatch within the family. While Jane's family was multilingual, Jane's parents noted her total immersion in English language television. This shows that Jane experiences loss and also disconnection with not just her community but also her family. In the interview, there was a mention where the family said that that her sibling, Jane's sibling, will often be mad at her because she didn't want to speak in Indonesian, and they refused to talk to Jane in English. Next is communication. So, uh, in the case study, A can use code switching very effectively. Like I said before, if he wanted to speak with his Albanian friend, he will speak in Albanian. If he wanted to speak to his parent, he will be using a Flemish, which means that he can code switch very effectively. He can also use his language to exclude or to include people in his conversation. So, however, Jane, like I said before, she cannot adapt. Therefore, she becomes isolated. Like if you can see in the presentation slide, it is a part from the interview where the study reported that she felt a bit stressful that she did not have any friends, which made her cry. And Jane also said that They, which refers to her friend, did not want to play with her, and how she had no friends, that her teacher is always angry at her. Okay, so last but not least is the learning process. So multilingualism provides a metalingualistic advantage, which makes it easier to learn further language. This is because, um, according to a study, according to a study by Sun in 2016, he said that if a person is a multilingual, this person, he or she can speak or understand language system better. It means that when we're talking about language, there will be a system in a language, right? So he or she, this person who is a multilingual speaker, they can decipher or they can figure out the system more quickly than monolingual speaker. Therefore, uh, the case study might suggest that A, the boy, the Greek boy, he might have a metalinguistic advantage. However, uh, he might also have what we call as trade-offs, such as he will have smaller vocabularies and slower word retrieval in each language. Because in the case study, it was mentioned that he was better in Greek because of the many exposure he received in school, but he had limited vocabulary in Albanian, English, and also Flemish in comparison, which means he still can speak all the four languages, but he have lower lower I'm sorry, he has lower vocabulary in the three languages. Okay. Okay, so as for the before we end this presentation, uh, this finding also connects with Cummins' theory of additive and subtractive multilingualism, which BICS refers to the social communication, which is the basic fluency, and CALP refers to the academic language proficiency. So, as for Jane, she has BICS in English. She has speaks in English, uh, but she lacks calc in Indonesian, which is the reason why she struggles in school. She does not have the academic language proficiency. Meanwhile, A, he managed to develop both. That's why he can succeed academically and also socially. Therefore, this is why A is known as additive multilingualism, which the languages he had learned can support each other. Meanwhile, Jane has subtractive multilingualism, which means one language replaces another. So that is all from me, and thank you so much.